Welcome to Lore of the Ring, where we uncover the hidden roads of Middle-earth and tell the tales that Tolkien never wrote. Before we begin, take a moment to let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time of day or night this narration has reached you. In the desolate wastes of what was once Mordor, where ash has given way to scattered wildflowers and the towers of Barad-dûr lie as broken stones beneath an endless sky, there stands a monument that few remember. Not to kings or wizards, not to the great and the mighty who shaped the fate of ages, but to a gardener. The wind carries whispers through these healing lands, whispers of a tale that history has somehow forgotten to tell in full. For when the bards sing of the War of the Ring, when scholars pen their learned treatises on the downfall of the Dark Lord, they speak always of Frodo Baggins, the ring-bearer who walked into shadow and emerged victorious. They speak of his burden, his sacrifice, his courage in carrying the One Ring to its destruction. But what if we have been telling the wrong story all along? Picture, if you will, the moment when all hope seemed lost. Mount Doom rises like a wound in the earth, its fires reflecting the approaching end of all things. Two figures struggle up its impossible slopes, not one, but two. And in that crucial instant, when the weight of the world itself seems too much to bear, it is not the ring-bearer who finds the strength to continue. It is his companion, his friend, his Sam. "I can't carry it for you," comes the voice through the choking air, "but I can carry you." These words, simple, unadorned, spoken without grand gesture or heroic posture, these words may well be the most important ever uttered in the history of Middle-earth. For in them lies a truth that even the wisest of the Valar might struggle to comprehend, that the greatest power is not the power to destroy, but the power to endure. Not the strength to bear burdens, but the strength to bear those who bear them. The histories tell us that Frodo Baggins was the hero of the Third Age. They are wrong. Look closer at the tapestry of those final days. See how the threads of fate truly weave together. When Frodo falters beneath the ring's crushing weight, who lifts him? When despair threatens to consume the last light of hope, whose simple faith burns brightest? When the very earth seems to reject their footsteps and the air itself becomes poison, who finds a way forward? Samwise Gamgee, the gardener, the one they called simple, the one who asked for nothing save the chance to serve. But this is not a tale of mere loyalty, though loyalty runs through it like a golden thread. This is not simply the story of a faithful servant, though service, true service, is at its heart. This is the story of how a hobbit who dreamed only of gardens and growing things became the true savior of all that lives and breathes under sun and star. For consider this, Frodo carried the ring, yes, but who carried Frodo? Frodo bore the weight of the world's fate upon his shoulders. But who bore the weight of Frodo himself? The ring-bearer walked into darkness, but he did not walk alone. And perhaps the one who walked beside him, who chose to walk beside him when all others had fallen away, perhaps he was the true hero all along. The contradiction runs deeper than mere semantics. In the grey years that followed the war, when Frodo could find no peace in the Shire he had saved, when the wounds of the Morgul blade and the ring's long torment drove him at last to seek healing in the undying lands, it was Sam who remained. Sam who took up the work of rebuilding. Sam who planted new gardens where old ones had withered. Sam who married and loved and lived while hung. His dearest friend sailed into the west, seeking a peace that Middle-earth could no longer provide. Who then truly bore the greater burden? The one who carried evil for a time and then was released from it? Or the one who carried hope and love and the future itself, and never set them down. Years later, when Sam himself had grown old in the service of life, when his beloved Rosie had passed beyond the circles of the world and his children had children of their own, he too was granted passage to the undying lands. For he had been a ring-bearer, if only briefly. He had touched the one ring and been touched by it in return. Yet when that moment came, that moment when his hand closed around the cursed gold, and all its power sang to him of dominion and glory, what did he see? Not conquest, not kingdoms bowing before his might. He saw Mordor transformed into a garden. He saw green things growing where only ash had been. He saw life triumphing over death, not through violence or force, but through the simple, profound act of making things grow. The ring, for all its malice and cunning, could not understand such a vision. It had been forged to amplify ambition, to twist noble desires into consuming hunger. But what do you do with a heart that hungers only to nurture? How do you corrupt a soul whose greatest wish is to see flowers bloom in desert places? In that moment, that brief, crucial moment, when Samwise Gamgee held the fate of all Middle-earth literally in his hands, the ring met something it had never encountered before. Not a great king to be tempted with greater kingdoms, not a wise wizard to be lured with deeper knowledge, but a gardener who was content to be a gardener, who asked for no more than the chance to help things grow. And so the ring passed from him, unregretted and unmissed, because Sam Gamgee understood something that even the mightiest of the wise had not fully grasped. That true power lies not in what you can take, but in what you can give. Not in what you can control, but in what you can nurture. Not in the strength to dominate, but in the strength to serve. The evening light falls softly now across the gardens of Bag End, where roses bloom as they have for generations, tended by loving hands. The Shire endures, green and peaceful, a testament to simple virtues in a complex world. And if you listen closely, very closely, you might still hear an echo of the words that saved everything worth saving. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. For though Frodo carried the ring, Sam carried Frodo. But the tale does not end there. Indeed, it scarcely begins there. To understand why Samwise Gamgee became the pivot upon which the fate of ages turned, we must delve deeper into the soil from which he grew. Not the rich earth of the Shire alone, but the deeper loam of choice and character that made him who he was. There is a reason, you see, that Tolkien chose a gardener to save his world. Not a king, though kings aplenty stride through the pages of his legendarium. Not a wizard, though their power shakes mountains and breaks the gates of cities. Not a warrior, though swords flash bright in the halls of his imagination. A gardener, one who works with his hands in the dirt, who understands the slow patience required to coax life from seeming death, who knows that the most important victories are often the smallest and the quietest. Consider the hobbits as Tolkien found them, dwelling in the green heart of the Shire. Here was a people untouched by the grand ambitions that drove the affairs of kings. They planted and harvested, celebrated and mourned, loved and lost and loved again, all within the compass of their green hills and winding lanes. They were, in the truest sense, content. And contentment, as any student of philosophy will tell you, is perhaps the rarest and most precious of virtues. But even among the hobbits, Sam stood apart, not in height, for all hobbits are small by the measure of the big folk. Not in learning, for though he was quick and clever, others had read more books and travelled further from their doors. He stood apart in something far more fundamental, in the depth and constancy of his loyalty, in the breadth and generosity of his love. Watch him in those early days, before the shadow of great events fell across his path. See how he tends the gardens of Bag End with a care that goes beyond mere employment. Each flower receives his attention as if it were the only flower in all the world. Every hedge is trimmed with the precision of a master craftsman, yet also with the tenderness of a parent caring for a beloved child. This is not mere work for Sam Gamgee. This is worship. This is his way of serving the music of creation itself. When Frodo inherits Bag End and all its grounds, what does he find? Not merely a servant who keeps the lawns neat and the paths swept clean. He finds an artist whose canvas is the living earth, whose paints are the flowers of spring and summer, whose masterpiece is the garden itself in all its seasonal glory. More than this, far more than this, he finds a friend whose loyalty runs deeper than any formal bond of service, whose affection asks nothing in return save the chance to give itself freely. But why should such loyalty exist at all? Here lies one of the great mysteries of Middle-earth, one that the wise might ponder for long years without finding its source. What debt did Sam owe to Frodo that would call him from the Shire's safety into the very heart of darkness? What oath had he sworn that would bind him to follow where even the courage of kings might fail? The answer is as simple as it is profound. None. No debt, no oath, no binding save that which he placed upon himself, freely chosen and freely maintained. Sam Gamgee followed Frodo Baggins into shadow and flame for the same reason that flowers turn toward the sun becked, as it was his nature to do so. Because love, once awakened, seeks always to serve the beloved, regardless of cost or consequence. Tolkien, writing in the aftermath of the Great War, understood something about heroism that his age was in danger of forgetting. He had seen the grand gestures and noble speeches, the banners flying, and the bugles calling men to glory. He had also seen the reality, the mud and blood, and endless grinding cost of conflict. And in that crucible of experience, he came to understand that the greatest heroes are not those who seek glory, but those who seek nothing for themselves at all. Sam Gamgee embodies this truth in every fibre of his being. When he stands at the borders of the Shire and takes his first step into the unknown world beyond, what drives him forward? Not the promise of adventure. He would be content never to leave Hobbiton again. Not the lure of treasure. He wants nothing that cannot be grown in good earth under familiar skies. Not even the hope of fame. He would be horrified at the thought of songs sung about his deeds. He goes because Frodo goes. He stays because Frodo needs him. He endures because to fail would mean Frodo's failure, and that is unthinkable. This is the gardener's wisdom, learned through seasons of patient labor, that growth takes time, that nurturing requires sacrifice, that the most beautiful flowers often bloom in the darkest soil. Sam applies this wisdom not only to plants and trees, but to the human heart itself. He tends Frodo's courage as carefully as he once tended the roses of Bag End, offering water when the spirit wilts, providing shelter when the storms of despair rage too fiercely. And what does he ask in return? Nothing. Less than nothing. The privilege of service is reward enough. The chance to help something precious survive and flourish is all the payment his heart requires. Watch him as the fellowship gathers in Rivendell, surrounded by lords and wizards, warriors and kings. Does he quail before such company? Does he feel himself unworthy of a place among the great? Perhaps. But when the moment comes to choose, when Frodo must decide whether to take up the burden of the ring, Sam's voice cuts through all the noble speeches and carefully reasoned arguments with words of such simple power that they silence the mighty. I'm going with him. Not a request, not a plea, a statement of fact as immutable as the rising of the sun. Sam Gamgee has looked into the future and seen his place in it, and that place is at Frodo's side, whatever may come. The Council of Elrond ends with many fair words about hope and duty, about the heroism required to face the Dark Lord in his strength. But the real decision, the one that will ultimately determine the fate of all Middle-earth, has already been made in the heart of a gardener who understands that love is not a feeling but an action, not a sentiment but a commitment that endures when all sentiment has been burned away. In a world ruled by kings and wizards, it was a gardener who remembered how to make things grow. Yet in the shadows, another truth emerges, one that cuts to the very heart of what it means to resist evil when evil wears the face of absolute power. For if we are to understand why Sam Gamgee proved more important than even Frodo in the grand tapestry of the War of the Ring, we must examine that moment when he himself became a ring-bearer, when the weight of dominion settled upon his shoulders and the whispers of the One Ring filled his ears with promises of infinite might. The moment comes in the tunnel of Toresh Ungol, where shadow lies thick as black water and the air itself seems poisoned with malice. Frodo has fallen beneath Shelob's sting, his body still and cold as stone. The great spider retreats, sated for the moment, leaving behind what appears to be a corpse and one small gardener, Wesi. Poe's world has just collapsed into ashes and despair. Sam Gamgee kneels beside his master's body, and the ring, that circle of cursed gold that has corrupted kings and consumed wizards, falls into his trembling hands. For the first time in the long journey from the Shire, Samwise the gardener holds the most powerful object ever forged in Middle-earth, the very instrument through which Sauron seeks to enslave all free peoples. What happens next reveals more about the nature of good and evil than all the libraries of Minas Tirith or the wisdom of the White Council combined. The ring speaks to Sam as it speaks to all who hold it. But its voice, accustomed to the ambitious hearts of those who seek power, finds itself in foreign territory. How do you tempt someone who wants nothing for himself? How do you corrupt a soul whose greatest desire is to serve others? The ring, for all its cunning malice, struggles to find purchase in a heart so utterly without selfishness. Yet it tries. Oh, how it tries. The vision comes to Sam with all the force of prophecy and the allure of paradise. Samwise the strong, Sam the hero, Sam the great. He sees armies bowing before him, kingdoms acknowledging his might. He sees himself crowned with glory, seated upon a throne that commands the obedience of all peoples, from the sea to the furthest mountains of the east. But then, and here lies the miracle that perhaps even Eru Ilúvatar might marvel at, the vision shifts. The ring, sensing that dreams of personal glory find no echo in Sam's heart, changes its approach. It shows him what he might do with such power in service of others. It whispers of the good that could be accomplished, the suffering that could be prevented, the wrongs that could be righted with but a word from the master of the ring. And for a moment, just a moment, Sam is tempted, not by the thought of ruling, but by the thought of healing. He sees Mordor itself transformed, its black plains turned green with growing things, its poison streams running clear and sweet. He sees the Shire expanded to encompass all the world, every corner of Middle-earth made as fair and peaceful as the gardens of Bag End. He sees himself not as a conqueror, but as the greatest gardener who ever lived, with power enough to make the whole world bloom. This is the ring's most subtle trap, the lure that has snared the wise and the pure throughout the ages. Not the promise of evil power, but the promise of good power. Not the chance to serve oneself, but the chance to serve others more completely than any mere mortal ever could. It is the temptation that comes not to the wicked, but to the righteous. The whisper that says, think of all the good you could do. And Sam, simple, loyal, loving Sam, looks upon this vision of universal paradise and laughs. He laughs because he sees the lie at its heart, not with the wisdom of Elrond or the foresight of Galadriel, but with the practical knowledge of one who has actually tended a garden. He knows, with the certainty of experience, that you cannot make things grow by commanding them to grow. You cannot nurture life by force, cannot create beauty through dominion, cannot spread love by wielding power over others. A garden requires patience, attention, individual care for each plant and flower. It requires working with the nature of growing things, not against it. It requires getting your hands dirty and your back sore, requires accepting that some plants will thrive and others will fail, requires understanding that the most beautiful growth often comes slowly and in ways you never expected. How can you garden the whole world when you haven't time to know each tree, each flower, each blade of grass? How can you love all people when love requires attention to the particular, the individual, the specific needs of each heart? The ring promises efficiency, but love is inefficient. The ring promises control, but life flourishes in freedom. Sam Gamgee, who has spent his life learning the patience of seasons and the humility of service, sees through the ring's grandest lie in an instant. He understands what even the mightiest of the wise sometimes forget. That power, however well-intentioned, corrupts by its very nature. That the desire to do good on a vast scale, if pursued through domination rather than service, becomes indistinguishable from the desire to do evil. So he sets the ring aside, not with a great struggle, not with heroic effort, but with the same gentle firmness he might use to set aside a tool that was wrong for the job at hand. He has work to do, real work. Frodo needs him. The mission continues. There is no time for fantasies of what might be, when what is requires all his attention and care. But the ring has taught Sam something in those brief moments, something that perhaps no other ring-bearer ever learned. He has felt the weight of ultimate power and found it light, empty. A burden that promises to lift all other burdens but delivers only greater burdens in return. He has looked into the heart of dominion and seen the void that lies there. Not evil, exactly, but the absence of everything that makes life worth living. When the orcs come and Sam learns that Frodo lives, when he must choose between keeping the ring and saving his friend, there is no choice at all. The ring falls from his fingers like autumn leaves, forgotten before it hits the ground. For Sam has discovered the secret that Sauron himself never learned, that the greatest power is the power to set power aside when love calls you to something higher. Later, much later, when the wise speak of the War of the Ring and analyze the strategies that led to victory, they will note that the ring came within a hair's breadth of returning to its master in that tunnel beneath the Ephel Duath. They will observe that if Sam had been corrupted, if he had claimed the ring for himself, or simply failed to rescue Frodo, all would have been lost. What they will not understand, what perhaps they cannot understand, is that the ring never truly had a chance. Not because Sam was too pure or too simple to be tempted, but because he was too wise. Wise with the wisdom of soil and seed, of patient growth and faithful tending. Wise enough to know that some tools are too dangerous to use, no matter how good your intentions. Wise enough to choose love over power, service over dominion, the particular over the universal. In that moment, the ring met something it could not consume, a heart content with little. And in meeting such a heart, the ring itself was diminished, not destroyed, not yet. That would come later, on the slopes of Mount Doom, but lessened, weakened by its encounter with someone who looked upon all its promises and found them wanting. For the first time in its long, dark existence, the ring had been not just refused, but dismissed. Set aside, not with fear or reluctance, but with the gentle finality of someone who had better things to do. The darkness of Torech Ungol swallows the sound of Sam's footsteps as he goes to find his master, leaving behind the instrument of ultimate power as casually as he might leave behind a broken watering can. And perhaps, in that gesture of sublime indifference, lies the seed of all that would follow: the long journey to Mount Doom, the bearing of burdens too great for any one heart to carry, and the final triumph of small things over great, of love over power, of gardeners over kings. The ring lies forgotten in the dust while Sam Gamgee goes about his real work, saving the world one friend at a time. But darkness breeds deeper truths, and in the crucible of the Fellowship's breaking, we begin to see the true architecture of heroism that Tolkien was building all along. For while the great of Middle-earth swore mighty oaths and spoke of honor and duty while they debated strategy, high in the halls of power and marshaled armies for the final confrontation with evil, it was the one who swore no oaths at all who proved most faithful to the cause that mattered. Look closely at the company that set forth from Rivendell on that cold December morning. 9 walkers against the shadow. Gandalf the Grey, mightiest of the Mire sent to Middle-earth. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, the king in exile whose bloodline stretched back to the foundations of the world. Boromir of Gondor, captain and warrior, pride of the greatest realm of men. Legolas of the woodland realm, prince among the elves whose eyes had seen the light of the trees. Gimli, son of Gloin, whose axe sang with the skill of Durin's folk. And 4 hobbits, small even by the measure of their own kind, walking into legends they could scarcely imagine. Of all that company, who spoke the fewest words at the Council of Elrond? Who made the least impressive display of credentials and mighty deeds? Who seemed, to the eyes of the wise and powerful, least qualified for the tremendous task ahead? Samwise Gamgee, gardener of Hobbiton, whose greatest accomplishment before that day had been the roses that bloomed outside Bag End's round windows. Yet watch what happens as the leagues unfold beneath their feet, as comfort gives way to hardship and then to genuine peril. Watch how the true strength of the Fellowship reveals itself and see where its heart truly lies. Gandalf, the wise, falls in the darkness of Moria, and with his fall, something breaks in the company that cannot easily be repaired. The loss of their guide, their protector, their connection to the greater powers of Middle-earth sends ripples of doubt and fear through every member of the Fellowship. They had followed the wizard's certainty. Without it, they must find their own way through an increasingly dark and hostile world. Boromir, proud Boromir, begins to speak more often of Gondor's need, of the folly of throwing away the One Ring when it might be used to save his people. The corruption works slowly, subtly, but it works. Here is a good man, a brave man, a man who loves his father and his city and his people with a fierce and noble heart. Yet the ring finds the crack in that nobility. The desire to save others becomes the desire to control others, to force them into safety, whether they will it or not. And what of the others? Aragorn carries the weight of kingship like a stone around his neck, torn between the duty he owes to Gondor and the oath he swore to Frodo. Legolas and Gimli, for all their growing friendship, are bound by the concerns of their own peoples, their own realms, their own ancient loyalties. Even Merry and Pippin, dear friends though they are, prove in the end to be pulled by currents larger than themselves, the call of adventure, the lure of great deeds, the chance to stand among the mighty and make their mark upon the world. But Sam simply walks, step after step, league after league, through all weathers and over all terrain. When Frodo struggles with the ring's weight, Sam is there, with a word of encouragement or a moment of levity to lighten the mood. When hunger gnaws at their bellies, Sam somehow manages to make their meager provisions stretch further, to find flavor in the plainest fare, to remind them of better days and better meals, waiting at journey's end. He asks for nothing, expects nothing, complains of nothing, save occasionally and quietly to himself when he thinks no one is listening. While others debate the wisdom of their course or question the choices that have brought them to this pass, Sam concerns himself with simpler, more immediate matters. Is Frodo warm enough? Have his feet been properly tended? Has he eaten his share of the lembas? Or is he giving it away again out of some misguided notion that others need it more? This is love in its purest form, not the grand passion that moves armies or the noble devotion that inspires songs, but the quiet, constant, daily choice to put another's welfare before your own. It requires no witnesses, seeks no recognition, makes no speeches about itself. It simply is, as constant as sunrise and as reliable as the turning of the seasons. When the fellowship finally breaks at Amon Hen, when Boromir's corruption leads to his attempt to take the ring by force, when the company scatters like leaves before the wind of fate, what does Sam do? The others make their choices. Aragorn pursues the Uruk-hai who have taken Merry and Pippin, choosing the immediate rescue over the ultimate mission. Legolas and Gimli follow their friend, bound by fellowship and the warrior's code. Even Gandalf, returned from death in robes of white, turns his attention to the greater war, to the defense of Gondor and Rohan. But Sam sees Frodo slip away alone, sees him disappear into the river and the darkness beyond, and without a moment's hesitation plunges in after him. Never mind that he cannot swim, a fact that nearly costs him his life in the swirling waters of the Anduin. Never mind that Frodo has made it clear he intends to continue the quest alone, that he believes the ring's corruption will spread to any who accompany him. Never mind that following means abandoning the relative safety of traveling with great warriors and wise guides in favor of walking straight into the heart of enemy territory with no protection save their own wit and courage. Sam's logic is simple, unanswerable, and completely immune to reasonable argument. Frodo needs him. Everything else is secondary. This is the moment when the true nature of the quest reveals itself. Not a grand adventure in which heroes stride forth to battle darkness, but a quiet pilgrimage in which love refuses to abandon love, no matter the cost. The War of the Ring will be won by armies and strategies, by the courage of kings and the wisdom of wizards, but the quest of the ring-bearer, the heart of the whole enterprise, will succeed or fail based on whether one small gardener can find the strength to keep walking when all hope seems lost. And he does. Day after day, mile after mile, through the Emin Muil's stony maze and the dead marsh's ghostly lights, up the bitter slopes of the Ephel Duath, and down into the ash-choked plain of Gorgoroth itself. While armies clash and cities burn, while the great of the world play their parts in the vast drama of the age's ending, Sam Gamgee tends to his master with the same patient care he once gave to growing things. He cooks when there is anything to cook, shares his water when his own thirst burns his throat, offers his shoulder when Frodo can barely stand. He tells stories to pass the dark hours, sings songs when the silence grows too oppressive, maintains the small rituals of courtesy and kindness that keep despair at bay. He does not speak of glory or duty or the fate of nations. He speaks of the Shire, of gardens and good earth, of simple pleasures waiting at journey's end. While others fought wars, Sam fought weariness, and won. For weariness, in the end, proves a more insidious enemy than any orc or troll. Weariness whispers that the journey is too long, the burden too heavy, the chance of success too small to justify the suffering. Weariness points out how easy it would be to simply stop, to sit down by the roadside and wait for whatever end might come. Weariness is the voice that says, "You have done enough. You have tried your best. No one could ask for more." But love answers weariness with stubborn persistence. Love finds strength where reason sees only emptiness. Love takes the next step because love cannot do otherwise, because to stop would be to abandon the beloved, and that is literally unthinkable. This is why Sam Gamgee proves more important than Frodo in the quest's ultimate success. Not because his burden is greater, it is not. Not because his courage is more pure. Courage comes to all hobbits when it is needed. But because his love is more constant, more reliable, more utterly without reservation or condition. Frodo carries the ring because he must. Sam carries Frodo because he chooses to, moment by moment, step by step, all the way to the fires of Mount Doom and beyond. And in that choice, renewed again and again in the face of every discouragement, every setback, every reason to despair, lies the true victory over darkness. The Fellowship breaks and reforms in new patterns. Kings ride to war, and wizards work their will. But at the heart of it all, two small figures continue their impossible journey, one bearing the weight of evil, the other bearing the bearer, both sustained by a love so simple and so profound that even the Dark Lord in his malice cannot comprehend its power. And so we come at last to the moment when all of Middle-earth balanced on the edge of a knife, not in the throne room of the Dark Tower where Sauron marshalled his vast armies, not in the fields before the Black Gate where the last free peoples made their desperate stand, but on the rocky slopes of an active volcano where two hobbits struggled upward through air thick with ash and despair. Mount Doom rises before them like a vision from the deepest nightmares of the world, its peak wreathed in fire and shadow, its roots planted in the very foundations of Sauron's power. Here, in this desolate place where no green thing has grown for 1,000 years, where the very stones seem to pulse with malevolent life, the fate of all living things will be decided. And the decision rests not with armies or kings, not with the wise or the mighty, but with a gardener whose greatest strength lies in his absolute refusal to give up hope. Frodo can barely stand, and the ring has grown so heavy that each step forward requires a supreme effort of will. Each breath comes harder than the last. The weight of the cursed gold around his neck is nothing compared to the weight of its malice pressing down upon his spirit, whispering constantly of failure and futility, of the folly of continuing when defeat is certain. But Sam sees his master failing and does what gardeners do when their most precious plants begin to wilt. He tends them. He offers water from his own precious supply, though his own lips are cracked with thirst. He shares the last crumbs of lembas, though his own stomach aches with hunger. He speaks words of encouragement, when encouragement seems a mockery in the face of such overwhelming odds. "Come on, Mr. Frodo," he says, and his voice is steady, though his heart is breaking. "Just a little further now. We're almost there. Almost there." As if there were some pleasant destination instead of the very heart of enemy territory. As if they were taking a morning walk through the Shire, instead of climbing toward what may well be their deaths. But this is Sam's gift, the ability to make the unbearable seem merely difficult, to find hope in the most hopeless of circumstances, to transform despair into determination through nothing more than the simple act of refusing to despair. Watch him as Frodo stumbles and falls, too weak to rise again. The ring-bearer lies motionless on the sharp stones, and for a moment it seems that the quest must end here, so close to its goal, yet impossibly far from victory. Any reasonable person would see the futility of the situation. Any sensible soul would recognize that they have reached the limits of what hobbit strength can accomplish. But Sam Gamgee has never been entirely reasonable, and his love for Frodo has never been particularly sensible. He looks down at his master's still form, calculates the distance yet to climb, measures it against the strength remaining in his own legs and lungs and heart. The arithmetic of despair tells him the task is impossible, so he ignores the arithmetic. Instead, he kneels beside Frodo and speaks the words that will echo through all the ages of Middle-earth, Words that capture in a single sentence the essence of what it means to love without condition, to serve without reservation, to hope without guarantee. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. These words, simple, unadorned, spoken without fanfare or dramatic gesture, these words contain more power than all the magic rings ever forged, more authority than all the crowns ever worn, more wisdom than all the scrolls in all the libraries of the world. They are the words that turn defeat into victory, despair into hope, ending into beginning. For in them lies the recognition of a profound truth, that we cannot take away the burdens of those we love, cannot spare them their pain or shield them from their trials. The ring must remain Frodo's to bear, just as the choice to continue must remain his to make. But we can carry the bearer. We can offer our strength when theirs fails, our hope when theirs falters, our love when they can no longer love themselves. Sam lifts Frodo onto his back, this small gardener whose greatest feat of strength before this day had been carrying a sack of potatoes from the market, and begins to climb. Each step is an agony, each breath a battle. The weight on his shoulders is nothing compared to the weight in his heart as he feels Frodo's weakness, hears his labored breathing, senses the terrible cost that carrying the ring has exacted from the one he loves most in all the world. But he climbs, step by agonizing step, foot by painful foot. He carries his burden up the impossible slope. And as he climbs, something miraculous begins to happen. The very air around them seems to lighten, not because the physical oppression of Mount Doom has lessened, but because love has entered a place where love was never meant to exist. The darkness remains, but it is no longer absolute. The despair continues, but it is no longer complete. For Sam brings with him something that Sauron in all his malice cannot account for or defend against. The simple, stubborn insistence that good exists, that beauty endures, that growing things will find a way to bloom even in the most barren soil. As he carries Frodo toward the Sammath Naur, he speaks of the Shire, not as a distant memory, but as a present reality, not as something lost, but as something waiting to be regained. "Do you remember the taste of strawberries, Mr. Frodo?" he asks, and his voice is gentle, despite the harshness of his breathing. "Do you remember the sound of water flowing in the mill stream? The feeling of grass beneath your feet when you walk barefoot in summer?" These are not idle words meant to distract from present suffering. They are declarations of faith, assertions that the world contains more than darkness and pain. They are reminders that somewhere beyond this desolation of stone and fire, flowers still bloom and rivers still run clear, that children still laugh and lovers still meet beneath the stars. With each remembered detail, the golden afternoons in Bag End's garden, the smell of pipeweed and the sound of fiddles at the Green Dragon, the way morning light falls across fields of grain, Sam builds a bridge between the horror of their present circumstances and the hope of future peace. He reminds Frodo not just of what they are fighting for, but of what they are fighting toward. Not merely the defeat of evil, but the restoration of good. And slowly, painfully, but with growing certainty, they climb. Sam's legs tremble with exhaustion. His lungs burn with the effort of drawing breath in air that seems more smoke than substance. The weight of Frodo's body presses down upon his shoulders until he can barely stand upright. But still he climbs, because love demands it, because hope requires it, because somewhere in the green heart of he Shire, gardens wait to be tended and life waits to be lived. The summit draws nearer. The fires of the Sammath Naur cast their red light across the tortured landscape below. Soon, very soon now, they will reach the place where the ring was forged, where it must be destroyed if Middle-earth is to see another dawn. But the final steps prove the hardest, not because the slope grows steeper or the air thinner, but because the ring itself begins to exert its full power against them. Frodo stirs on Sam's back, roused by proximity to the source of the ring's creation. The cursed gold around his neck grows hot as a brand, and its whispers become screams of rage and panic. For the ring can sense its approaching doom, can feel the flames that will unmake it waiting just ahead. In its desperation, it lashes out with all the malice and cunning at its command. But it makes a crucial error. It focuses its attack on Frodo, on the bearer, on the one who has carried it so far and suffered so much in its service. It does not account for the one who carries the bearer, the one whose love has proved stronger than the ring's corruption, whose hope has outlasted its despair. Sam feels Frodo's struggle, senses the terrible battle being fought in his master's heart and mind. He cannot fight that battle for him. The ring's final test must be Frodo's alone to face. But he can do what he has always done. He can be present, steady, unshakable in his devotion. He can offer his strength not as a replacement for Frodo's courage, but as a foundation upon which that courage can stand. "We're here, Mr. Frodo," he whispers, and his voice carries all the love and faith and stubborn hope that has brought them so far. "We're at the end of all things, but it's not the end of us. Not if we don't let it be. There's still time for one more choice, one more step forward into the light. And there, on the threshold of the Sammath Naur, with the fires of creation and destruction roaring just beyond the doorway, Sam Gamgee sets down his burden with infinite gentleness. Frodo's feet touch the ground, but he does not stand alone. Sam's hand rests on his shoulder, warm and steady, and utterly without fear. "I'm with you," Sam says, and in those 3 simple words lies all the heroism that Middle-earth has ever known. Not the flashy courage of warriors charging into battle, not the grand gestures of kings leading their armies to glory, but the quiet, constant, daily heroism of one heart refusing to abandon another, no matter how dark the path ahead. Together, they step into the fire-lit chamber where the fate of the world waits to be decided. And though the ring will have its moment of triumph, though Frodo will falter at the very threshold of victory, the outcome is already determined. For love has carried them this far, and love, patient, stubborn, enduring love, will find a way to carry them home. And so the smallest heart carried the weight of eternity. Yet victory, when it comes, tastes of ashes in the mouth. The ring burns in the fires of Mount Doom. Sauron's power breaks like a wave against the shores of morning, and the darkness that has hung over Middle-earth for so long lifts at last. The armies of the West rejoice. The people of Gondor and Rohan celebrate in the streets, and songs are sung of the brave deeds done in the War of the Ring. But for one small gardener, sitting in the ruins of the Sammath Naur with his unconscious master cradled in his arms, the moment of triumph feels strangely hollow. Sam Gamgee has saved the world. This truth will become clear in time, written in the histories and sung by the bards of future ages. But as he sits there, in the fading glow of the mountain's fires, listening to Frodo's labored breathing and watching the ash fall like snow around them, salvation feels very much like ending. They have won, yes, but at what cost? And what precisely have they won? The eagles come at last, great Gwaihir and his kindred, bearing them away from the ruin of Mordor to the safety of the Cormallen field, where King Elisar waits to honor the ring-bearers before all his assembled host. There are tears and laughter, embraces and speeches, a great outpouring of joy and gratitude that seems to encompass all the free peoples of Middle-earth. Merry and Pippin dance and sing. Legolas and Gimli clasp the hobbits to their hearts, and even stern Aragorn weeps openly as he sets the crown of Gondor aside to kneel before 2 gardeners from the Shire. But Sam notices things that others miss in their celebration. He sees how Frodo flinches at loud noises, how his hand moves instinctively to his throat where the ring once hung, how his eyes sometimes focus on distances that no one else can see. The ring is gone, its power broken forever, but its shadow lingers in the heart of the one who bore it longest. And Sam, who has learned to read Frodo's moods like weather signs in the sky, understands with a growing certainty that their troubles are far from over. The journey home should be a triumph. 4 hobbits returning to the Shire as heroes, their pockets full of gifts from grateful kings, their names already passing into legend. They take the long road through Rohan and across the misty mountains, pausing to rest in Rivendell and visit old Bilbo before continuing westward toward the green hills of home. It should be a time of healing, of gradual return to the peaceful rhythms of Shire life after the great adventure's end. Instead, it becomes a slow agony of watching Frodo slip away. Oh, he tries to hide it. Frodo has always been considerate that way, always reluctant to burden others with his troubles. He smiles at the right moments, laughs at Merry and Pippin's jokes, participates in their conversations about what they'll do when they reach Hobbiton. But Sam sees through the performance to the pain beneath. He sees how Frodo's hand trembles when he thinks no one is looking, how he stares at the fire with eyes that hold too much darkness, how he wakes in the night gasping from dreams he will not describe. The Shire, when they reach it at last, has its own troubles. The scouring of Sharky, as the histories will call it, provides a welcome distraction from deeper worries. Here is something concrete to fix, a wrong that can be set right through action rather than mere waiting and hoping. Sam throws himself into the work of restoration with something approaching relief. Gardens to replant, houses to rebuild, a countryside to heal from the scars of greed and neglect. These are problems he understands, challenges he can meet with his own 2 hands and the skill learned through years of patient labor. He becomes, almost without realizing it, one of the leaders of the new Shire. Not through any ambition of his own, Sam Gamgee remains as free from personal ambition as ever, but because people naturally turn to him for guidance. He has seen the wide world, has walked with kings and spoken with wizards, has faced terrors that most hobbits cannot even imagine. More than that, he has the gardener's wisdom about growth and healing, about patience and persistence, about the long work of nurturing life in damaged soil. He marries his beloved Rosie, as he always dreamed he would. Their wedding is a celebration that seems to embrace the entire Shire, a joyous affirmation of life and love and the simple pleasures that make existence worthwhile. For a few golden hours, it seems as if the shadow of the war might finally be lifting, as if happiness might be possible after all the sorrow and struggle. But even on his wedding day, Sam notices that Frodo slips away from the festivities early, claiming weariness, but carrying himself with the careful precision of someone holding himself together through sheer will. And later, much later, when the guests have gone home and the house is quiet, Sam finds his master sitting alone in Bag End's garden, staring up at the stars with an expression of such profound loneliness that it breaks the gardener's heart all over again. The years that follow are bittersweet in ways that Sam struggles to understand. The Shire flourishes under his care. Children are born, gardens bloom with unprecedented beauty. The scars of Sharky's occupation fade beneath new growth and renewed prosperity. Sam serves as mayor for decade after decade, not because he seeks the position, but because the hobbits trust him to guide them wisely and well. His own family grows, children and grandchildren who fill his heart with a joy he had never dared to imagine. Yet through it all, Frodo remains apart. Not physically, he still lives at Bag End, still tends to his writing and his books, still receives visitors with courtesy and grace. But emotionally, spiritually, He dwells in a place that Sam cannot reach, cannot heal, cannot restore to wholeness, no matter how much love he pours into the effort. The wound made by the Morgul blade at Weathertop has never fully healed. On the anniversary of that night, and on the anniversary of the ring's destruction, Frodo falls into a darkness so profound that Sam fears each time that it will claim him completely. He burns with fever, speaks words in languages Sam doesn't recognize, cries out for help that no earthly power can provide. And Sam sits beside him through those long nights, offering what comfort he can, knowing that his love, vast and deep and constant though it may be, is not enough to bridge the gap between his master and the peace he so desperately needs. It's Gandalf who finally explains what Sam has begun to suspect, but has been afraid to acknowledge. Ledge, some wounds go too deep for healing in Middle-earth, some burdens leave marks that will never fade. Frodo has given everything he had to give in service of the quest, has poured out his very soul to save the world, and what remains is not enough to sustain him in the life he once knew. He needs the peace that can only be found beyond the circles of the world, the wizard says gently. And Sam understands at last why Frodo has seemed so distant, so lost, so unable to find joy in the simple pleasures that once delighted him. He is not meant to stay. His time in Middle-earth is drawing to a close, not through death, but through departure, through passage to a place where wounds can heal and weariness can find rest. The knowledge, when it comes, hits Sam like a physical blow. All these years, he has been fighting to keep Frodo with him, to nurse him back to health, to restore him to the hobbit he was before the ring and the quest and the terrible weight of saving the world. But that hobbit is gone, has been gone since the moment Frodo first put the ring on his finger in the prancing pony so many years ago. What remains is someone Sam loves just as deeply, but can no longer help in the ways that matter most. So he does what he has always done when faced with Frodo's needs. He sets aside his own desires and helps his master find what he requires for healing, even though it means losing him forever. On that grey morning at the Grey Havens, Sam holds his tears until the white ship has passed beyond the sight of land, until the last glimpse of sail has vanished into the morning mist. Only then, alone on the harbour stones with Merry and Pippin weeping beside him, does he allow himself to grieve for the friendship that was the defining relationship of his life. But even in grief, Sam Gamgee proves his heroism one final time. He does not rage against fate or demand that the world be other than it is. He does not waste his remaining years mourning what he has lost. Instead, he turns back toward the Shire and the life waiting for him there, his beloved Rosie, his children, his gardens, his responsibilities as mayor and guardian of simple prosperity. He will live for many years yet, growing old in service to the Shire he helped to save, finding joy in small things and satisfaction in work well done. The shadow of Frodo's absence will never fully lift from his heart, but neither will it prevent him from embracing the good that remains, from nurturing life and love and hope in the green heart of the world he calls home. For even heroes must till the soil where their tears have fallen. The gardens of Bag End bloom more beautifully than ever under Sam's continuing care. And if sometimes visitors think they glimpse a second figure working among the roses, someone slight and gentle with eyes that hold too much knowledge of sorrow, well, gardens have always been places where memory and reality intertwine, where love plants seeds that bloom long after the gardener has laid down his tools. Time moves differently for those who have touched eternity. While the Shire measures its days in seasons and harvests, in the laughter of children and the quiet satisfaction of work well done, Sam Gamgee carries within his heart a deeper rhythm, the pulse of memory, the cadence of loss, the slow movement of healing that comes only to those who have loved completely and lost much. 60 years pass. 60 springs bring their carpet of flowers to the gardens of Bag End. 60 summers see the fruits ripen and the grain turn golden in the fields. 60 autumns pile their treasure of red and gold leaves at the feet of the party tree. 60 winters wrap the Shire in the quiet peace of snow and sleep, each one a small death that promises resurrection. And through it all, Sam Gamgee tends his gardens with the same patient care he brought to tending Frodo through the darkest days of their quest. He serves as mayor year after year, not from ambition, but from the simple recognition that service is love made visible, that leadership is merely another form of gardening, helping good things grow while preventing weeds from taking root. His beloved Rosie grows old beside him, her hair silver now where once it was gold, her step slower, but her smile unchanged. Their children grow up and have children of their own, filling Bag End with laughter and the sound of small feet running through halls that once echoed with loneliness. Sam watches them with the wonder of a man who never quite believed such happiness was meant for him, who still sometimes wakes expecting to find himself on a cold mountainside with only starlight for company. But the years exact their price, as years always do. Rosie's strength begins to fail. Her breath comes shorter. Her hands tremble as she tends her own small corner of the garden they have shared for so long. Sam watches the slow change with the same careful attention he once gave to seedlings struggling to break through hard ground, knowing that some seasons must end if others are to begin, understanding that love sometimes means learning to let go. When she dies, peacefully, in their bed, with his hand holding hers and their children gathered around, Sam feels something break inside him that he knows will never mend. Not the clean break of sudden tragedy, but the slow, inevitable fracture that comes when half of your soul departs and leaves the remainder to carry on alone. He tends her grave with the same devotion he once lavished on her living presence, ensuring that flowers bloom there in every season, that the small plot of earth that holds her remains becomes a garden worthy of the love she gave and received. The Shire continues to flourish under his care. The gardens of Bag End become legendary throughout the Four Farthings, drawing visitors from as far away as Bree and the Tower Hills. They come to see the roses that bloom larger and more fragrant than any others in Middle-earth, the vegetables that grow with impossible abundance, the fruit trees that bear sweet harvests year after year without fail. But Sam knows the real secret of his success has nothing to do with gardening technique or favorable soil. It has to do with love poured into the earth like water onto thirsty ground. Love for Frodo, who taught him that simple devotion could move mountains. Love for Rosie, whose memory makes every flower bloom more brightly. Love for the Shire itself, the green heart of a world that might have been lost forever, if not for the courage of small folk to do great things. But as the years pass and his hair turns white and his step grows slower, Sam begins to feel something stirring in his heart. Not the restlessness of one who yearns for adventure, but the quiet certainty of one who senses that his greatest journey may still lie ahead. The feeling grows stronger when Merry and Pippin, grown old in the service of their respective peoples, come to say their farewells before departing for Gondor to spend their final years with King Elisar. "The time is coming," Merry says, and his eyes hold the same distant look that Sam remembers from Frodo's face in those last years before the sailing. "Can you feel it, Sam? The pull of the sea, the call of the havens? We who bore the ring-bearer's burden, even briefly, we're not meant to grow old in Middle-earth." Sam knows what he means, though he has tried for years not to acknowledge the growing restlessness in his own spirit. The right to sail west, granted to those who bore the ring or aided in its destruction, is not merely a privilege. It is a summons that grows harder to resist with each passing season. The wound inflicted by carrying such a burden requires ailing that can only be found beyond the circles of the world, in the peace of the undying lands, where time moves differently and pain at last finds rest. Yet Sam hesitates, torn between duty and desire. His children still need him. The Shire still looks to him for guidance. The gardens of Bag End still require his care. How can he abandon the responsibilities that have shaped his life for so many years? How can he leave the green hills of home for an unknown shore, however blessed? The answer comes, as answers often do, in the form of a dream. He sees Frodo clearly for the first time in decades. Not the wounded, haunted figure who sailed away, but the young hobbit who once delighted in walking through fields of flowers, who loved books and poetry and the simple pleasure of good friends sharing a meal. Frodo smiles at him with eyes that are clear and bright and utterly at peace. "The garden is beautiful, Sam," he says, and his voice carries the warmth that Sam has missed more than he ever dared admit. "But gardens are meant to be shared. Come and see what grows in the country beyond the sea." Sam wakes with tears on his cheeks and certainty in his heart. He spends the next months setting his affairs in order, ensuring that the Shire will continue to prosper under the care of his children and their children, that the traditions he helped establish will endure long after his departure. He visits every corner of the land he has loved and served, saying farewell to places and people who have shaped his life in ways both great and small. The hardest goodbye comes at Rosie's grave, where he kneels among the flowers and speaks words that no other ears will hear. Promises of eternal love, gratitude for years of happiness beyond his deserving, hope that they will find each other again in whatever country lies beyond the sunset. He plants one last rosebush by her headstone, its blooms a deep red like her hair in the firelight of their early days together. The journey to the Grey Havens passes like a waking dream. Sam travels light, carrying little more than the memories of a lifetime spent in service to others. At the harbour, he finds Merry and Pippin waiting for him, their faces bright with anticipation and sorrow intermingled. Cerdon the shipwright greets them with the grave courtesy of one who has watched many partings and knows the weight they carry. The white ship waits at anchor, its sails furled, but ready to catch the wind that will bear them beyond the edge of the world. As Sam steps aboard, he feels a tremor of fear mixed with overwhelming relief. For 60 years, he has carried the burden of loss, the ache of separation from the friend who meant more to him than his own life. Now, at last, that burden is about to be lifted. The ship moves away from the harbour with barely a whisper of sound, drawn by currents deeper than the sea itself. Sam stands at the rail, watching the shores of Middle-earth recede into memory, feeling each league of distance as both an ending and a beginning. The familiar coastline grows smaller and smaller until it vanishes entirely, leaving only the endless expanse of water stretching toward a horizon that holds no shadow. But as the sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose that would make even the gardens of Bag End seem pale by comparison, Sam sees something that makes his heart leap with joy, so pure it feels like physical pain. Another ship approaches from the west, its sails glowing with light that seems to come from within rather than from the sun above. And on its deck, clearly visible despite the distance, stands a figure Sam would recognize across any span of time or space. Frodo raises his hand in greeting, and his smile holds all the warmth and joy that Sam has carried in his heart through all the long years of separation. He looks exactly as he did in the dream, young, whole, utterly at peace. The two ships draw alongside each other, and Sam steps across the gap between them, with legs that feel suddenly strong, hands that no longer shake with age, a heart that beats with the vigor of youth renewed. Frodo embraces him with tears of joy streaming down his face, and Sam understands at last what he has truly won through all his years of faithful service. Not rest, though rest awaits. Not reward, though rewards beyond imagining lie ahead. What Sam has won is the one thing he has always valued above all others: the chance to continue the greatest friendship of his life in a place where parting is impossible and sorrow cannot touch. "Welcome home, Sam," Frodo whispers, and the words echo across the waters like music, like promise, like the sound of eternal spring awakening in a garden that will never know winter. The ship turns toward the west, carrying them both toward a shore where the light never fails, and growing things flourish beyond all earthly measure. And if the gardens there bloom more beautifully for the presence of one small gardener who learned to love without reservation, to serve without reward, to hope without guarantee, well, that is only fitting. For gardens, like friendships, grow best when tended by those who understand that the greatest power in all the worlds is not the power to destroy or command or conquer, but the power to nurture, to heal, to help good things grow in the soil of a heart that has learned to love completely. And thus, the gardener entered the garden beyond the world. But perhaps, in the end, the greatest truth of Samwise Gamgee lies not in his departure, but in what he leaves behind. Not merely the gardens that still bloom in the Shire's green heart, not simply the children and grandchildren who carry his blood and his wisdom forward into new generations, but something far more precious and enduring. The example of what it means to be truly heroic in a world that often mistakes power for virtue, noise for significance, grand gestures for genuine goodness. For if we step back from the tale and see it whole, if we look past the dragons and the battles, the kingdoms and the crowns, the magic and the monsters that populate the surface of Tolkien's great work, we find at its heart a truth so simple and so profound that it threatens to upend everything we think we know about heroism itself. The real hero of the War of the Ring was not the king who claimed his throne, nor the wizard who returned from death, nor even the ring-bearer who carried his burden to the very edge of doom. The real hero was a gardener who understood that the most important battles are not fought with swords but with steadfast love, that the greatest victories are not won through conquest but through service, that true strength lies not in the power to destroy but in the power to preserve, to nurture, to help good things grow, even in the darkest of times. This is why Sam Gamgee matters more than Frodo, more than Aragorn, more than all the great and mighty who shaped the fate of the Third Age. Not because his deeds were more spectacular, they were not. Not because his suffering was greater, though it was deep and real and lasting. But because he embodies something that the world needs more desperately than magic or kingship or even courage itself: the recognition that ordinary goodness, faithfully practiced, can withstand any evil, can outlast any darkness, can overcome any despair. Watch him one more time as he climbs the slopes of Mount Doom with Frodo on his back. See past the surface drama of the moment to its deeper meaning. Here is love made manifest, service transformed into salvation, the power of one heart refusing to abandon another despite every reason to despair. This is not heroism as the world usually understands it. There are no armies following Sam up that terrible slope, no banners flying, no songs being sung of his courage. There is only a gardener doing what gardeners do, tending something precious, helping it survive when survival seems impossible, refusing to give up even when giving up would be the reasonable thing to do. And in that refusal lies a lesson that extends far beyond the borders of Middle-earth, far beyond the realm of fantasy literature, into the very heart of what it means to be human in a world that often seems designed to break the human spirit. For we all carry burdens, perhaps not rings of power forged in the fires of evil, but burdens nonetheless. The weight of responsibility, the ache of loss, the crushing uncertainty of trying to do right in a world where right and wrong are not always clearly marked. We all walk up our own versions of Mount Doom, struggling with loads that seem too heavy to bear, facing challenges that appear too great to overcome. And we all need our own Samwise Gamgees, friends who will walk beside us when the path grows dark, who will carry us when our strength fails, who will remind us of beauty and goodness and hope when despair whispers that such things are illusions. More than that, we all need to become Samwise Gamgees for others, to recognize that the most heroic thing we can do is not to perform great deeds, but to perform small acts of love with great consistency, to serve without seeking recognition, to hope without guarantee of reward. This is Tolkien's deepest wisdom, born from his experience of war and loss, of watching young men die in trenches far from home, of seeing civilization itself teeter on the edge of collapse. He understood that the world is not saved by the grand gestures of the mighty, but by the quiet faithfulness of ordinary people who choose love over fear, service over selfishness, hope over despair, again and again and again, until choosing becomes second nature, until goodness becomes as automatic as breathing. Samwise Gamgee represents all of us at our best, not the heroic best that requires extraordinary circumstances and superhuman courage, but the everyday best that requires nothing more than the decision to care for others as much as we care for ourselves, to see our lives as opportunities for service rather than occasions for self-advancement, to find meaning not in what we achieve, but in what we give. He is the answer to cynicism, the response to those who claim that goodness is weakness, that nice guys finish last, that power is the only thing that really matters in the end. For Sam finishes first in every way that counts, not because he seeks victory, but because he defines victory differently than the world does. His victory is not conquest, but connection, not dominion, but devotion, not the triumph of his will, but the triumph of his love. The gardens still bloom at Bag End, tended now by other hands, but grown from seeds that Sam planted, watered with care he taught, blessed by the example he set of what it means to serve something greater than oneself. The Shire endures, green and peaceful and prosperous, not because of any grand strategy or mighty deed, but because one small gardener understood that the best way to change the world is to tend your own corner of it with such love and care that its beauty becomes contagious, inspiring others to plant gardens of their own. And perhaps this is the most important truth of all, that heroism is not something reserved for the few, the great, the specially chosen. It is available to anyone willing to embrace the hard, unglamorous work of loving consistently, serving faithfully, hoping stubbornly in the face of all evidence that hope is foolish. It requires no special powers, no royal bloodlines, no magical weapons, only the simple, radical decision to live as if other people matter, as if small kindnesses accumulate into great victories, as if love really is stronger than hate. The world needs more kings like Aragorn, more wizards like Gandalf, more warriors brave enough to ride into battle against overwhelming odds. But even more, it needs gardeners like Sam, people who understand that the most important work is often the least visible, that the greatest power lies in the simple act of refusing to let hope die, that true heroism consists not in being remembered by history, but in being remembered by those whose lives we touch with our ordinary, extraordinary love. Middle-earth was not saved by swords, nor by kings, but by kindness that refused to die. And perhaps even now, in gardens around the world where simple people tend growing things with patient care, where friends help friends carry burdens too heavy to bear alone, where love persists despite every reason to despair. Perhaps even now, Sam's song still grows in the hearts of those who remember that the smallest light can drive away the greatest darkness, that the humblest service can achieve the mightiest victories, that a gardener's love can save the world. The story ends, but the truth it carries continues, planted like seeds in the hearts of all who hear it, waiting to bloom in gardens, yet to be tended by hands, yet to learn the simple, profound lesson that Samwise Gamgee lived and died to teach. That in the end, love wins not because it is strong, but because it endures. Not because it conquers, but because it serves. Not because it demands recognition, but because it asks for nothing more than the chance to help good things grow. And in that asking, in that serving, in that enduring love, lies all the heroism the world will ever need. Dear listener, this story ends, but many await. Subscribe so no tale escapes you.